because I'm not doing anything. All right, cool. Okay, Tom. Awesome. Can you tell me about you though and your race and why you're running, so I know more about you? I've only read your website and basic stuff.
Oh, excellent. Realized in 2015 that the things that I'd been boring my friends with for decades were now speakable. And I thought I knew a bunch 5 years ago, and compared to the population in general, that was true. But I have spent literally the last 4 years, 7 days a week, learning, talking to people to the last 3 months. And I have a PhD in theoretical physics, which implies a certain habit of thought, which is to keep stepping back until you can see the big picture. And the big picture is really, really simple. And you address it in one of your platform issues, which is public funding of elections. But I was going to complain about that because you took a road which is similar to the HR-01 road that was introduced as a fake bill in the House in 2018, where they passed 100 reasonably good bills, knowing that Mitch McConnell would protect them from ever being passed. So it allows the Democratic Party to appear to be progressive, but they still protect themselves by cluttering up the bills a little bit in case by some odd accident one of those bills passed. And the HR-1 bill did include a nice public funding option, but it included it in a fashion in which did not separate public money from corporate money. And
well, that's definitely not something I supported, though. I supported democracy dollars, just Andrew Yang's proposal, which I don't believe he ever made a bill. He ever wrote a bill because he's never been a legislator.
I've read so many things, and I probably conflated.
That's okay.
Stuff. Yeah.
That's okay. No, my proposal was just I just like the public voucher system, rather giving people directly a voucher. I think you support that too, from what I was reading, the vouchers.
Well, I wasn't sure about Andrew Yang's stuff, I guess. I make sure in mind that anyone who takes voucher dollars can take nothing else. And you put enough voucher dollars out there that the person can easily defeat the other person. And by that, I mean that even with infinite money, the corporate candidate, all he will achieve is media saturation. And there's a negative return if every time you turn on the TV, you see Joe Biden. I'm sorry, if you see Donald Trump. Yeah, it's hard to tell them apart, I'm afraid.
Right.
One of them's much more polite.
Okay. So why did you decide to run for your seat? What's the situation in your seat in particular?
Well, I figured 4 years ago when they trashed Bernie in the 2016 campaign that there's a very real possibility that Donald Trump would win, because people had woken up enough to realize that both parties were trashing them, even if they didn't vocalize it that way. That explains the ever larger percentage of no political association. In Florida, we call it NPAs. They have independents and other terminology in other states. But it means the same thing. And most young people are joining no party. So it's really critical to have open primaries. So the important part of the election is who gets on the general election ballot. And if you can't get to the primary, if people can't even vote for you because they're not in a party, the NPAs are really the progressive wing of America, in my estimation. Some progressives are smart enough politically, not in terms of general opinion, but smart enough politically to recognize that you have to get in the party because there's only 2 lines on the ballot effectively.
Yeah. So, but you're running as a Democrat or you're not?
Oh, I am running as a Democrat.
Okay.
In
Okay.
2016, I ran as an MPA.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that was actually tactically quite superior because in this district they treated NPAs with respect, unlike say Maryland, where they had the police throw an NPA off the stage because they only wanted 2 parties.
Right.
So even though she was a qualified candidate and was on the ballot, they literally drug her off the stage.
Oh
And
my goodness.
yeah, well, but in this district, it allowed me to get in every debate and continue the campaign through November, which the campaign was only about building base and learning the ropes.
Hmm.
And
So you already had your primary and you,
oh, no, the primary is August 18th. We have a very
August
late
18th. That's very
primary.
late. Yeah, that's very late. Okay.
Yeah.
And who are you running against? Is there an incumbent in Democrat or is there a Republican seat?
Ted Yoho declared 8 years ago that he was only going to run 4 terms, and he actually only ran 4 terms.
Okay, so you don't have an incumbent. Okay, so you
So it's an
retired.
open seat, which meant that there are 10 Republicans trying to out-Trump each other, and there are 3 Democrats.
Okay.
Yes. So the out-Trumpers, we're taking notes, keeping receipts, and the idea is to make sure that when Trump becomes absolutely unviable, which he's working diligently to be, then we will tell them what they were saying 3 months ago and ask them if they're really different people now.
Mm.
So the general election, in my mind, is going to be controlled by whether you have honest voting and honest elections, because
Mhm.
the will of the people is pretty clear, and the tragedy that is unfolding in America is only going to become worse. Even Dr. Fauci is so desperate to keep his position of, slight influence on what the government does, that even when he's not around Trump, he does not tell the truth. The CDC is politically defining things which they used to actually take pride in defining scientifically.
Right.
Fauci is talking about maybe things will get worse. Well, with no immunity and no tracking and no containment, and with 2 million people we know who have the disease, when you open up, it just automatically gets worse.
Is it already opened up in Florida? Or?
Variably, Trump does plan to have his rally here in Florida. I'm sorry, they call it a nominating convention. But I think rally would be a lot more
Appropriate.
accurate.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So are you in the phase 1, or you're going around and you can do things, or how?
I am rationally intelligent, and I have been out to Black Lives Matter protests with a mask, trying not to turn my face, even with a mask, to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
And being outdoors is much better than being indoors.
Mm-hmm.
But one person without a mask can really challenge a lot of other people, because if they sneeze, it covers
Yeah.
50 feet away from them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And the fact that the number of cases per day is not higher now than it was a month ago is because I think people are taking, by and large, personal initiative for their own protection. But this will last until we have a vaccine, which probably, from a rational observational point of view, will be another year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So unless you want a vaccine that kills people, because it has, vaccines are so tricky that
Right. So, so as far as like the economic impact of that, I mean, do you support the direct relief payments to people during the crisis, or what are your thoughts on
well,
direct cash relief?
if we had taken the $4 trillion of zero interest loans that were made available to the people who do nothing except pad their wallets, if we'd taken that $4 trillion and put up solar panels as fast as we could, you can do that work at 10 or 20 feet away from each other. You can work on bridges and roads and extending internet to everybody so that it is a social service, just like the post office is. It's very much equivalent to the role of the post office, giving everyone equal access to information at the same price. The post office is required to deliver from Key West to Nome, Alaska for whatever the price of a first class stamp is. And even for packages, the rate between any 2 points is the same. That was part of Benjamin Franklin's idea that we're one nation, kind of a forgotten concept.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest problem, no, there's so many problems. It's hard to be the winner in the biggest problem category. A tremendous problem is the fact that you cannot address containment of the pandemic unless you treat it as a national problem. So a state cannot control its border crossings, cannot control the planes that are landing, cannot insist on quarantining everybody who comes into the country. And containment at this point, with 2 million known cases and probably 6 or 8 million unknown cases, and people who are asymptomatic are the principal carriers and spreaders of the disease. We have to adopt completely new national strategy to have any hope of not getting to herd immunity. And the Swedes showed that that's a very bad approach. They started from day one, and I think they're actually past us in deaths per million because they didn't make an effort early to block it. But we made a completely wasted effort because we did none of the intellectually required statement actions during the period of lockdown to allow any in relief of lockdown, but we just started opening up anyway. And I am really delighted that it's not gotten worse any faster than it has. And again, I repeat myself, that's because many of us taking real personal responsibility for what's going on in our own lives.
Right.
But
so you would favor like a large jobs program over a direct cash relief during the crisis? Is that?
Well, a large job programs would be direct relief and also begin to address the overwhelming problem of climate change. But you have to give money, whether you can find something useful for people to do or not. You don't bail out the people who have tens of billions of dollars and make the stock market okay while life is crappy. We did that the SNL bailout in the mid 80s, 2008 collapse. And what they've learned is rich people have learned that this is the fastest way to get to one person having $1 trillion is to create disasters, create economic collapse. And I think this year may be marked by 2 bailouts because the small businesses can't pay their rent. The people in apartments can't pay their rent.
Right.
These are all commercial real estate, and commercial real estate before the pandemic was being bundled and over-evaluated illegally. So we're
Right.
rushing towards a bank bailout.
Right. Well, don't you feel like if we had given money directly to the people, they'd be able to pay their rent and their bills and, you know,
Oh,
make it through while staying at home?
I'm sorry, I didn't make myself clear. But
That's okay.
yes, yes,
Okay. Okay.
in most all the countries of Western Europe, the money that was spent went to give 80% of the salary to people and to give some support to small businesses, and they didn't bail out the stock market.
Right.
They
Yeah.
did some because the
Mhm.
wealthy have some influence, but in
Right.
Western Europe, the people have some influence too.
A lot
And
more. Yeah, a lot more.
in America, I believe, and I need to publish an editorial on this, that the disconnect began with the 76 and 78 Supreme Court decisions, which declared money as political speech,
Mhm.
which means that bribery during campaigns is legal, and both parties pretty rapidly adopted that. The Democratic Party under Clinton officially became neoliberal and basically declared its complete dependence upon corporate funding.
Yeah,
And
clearly a massive issue that we're seeing now 20 years later plus later, but yeah, I mean, definitely. So I'm glad that you support the direct cash relief. I mean, the issues that I ran my campaign on were similar to yours, except I do believe universal basic income is
I
foundational.
saw
So
that, yeah.
I did want to talk about that and just my experience, you know, as a
Oh, it doesn't play well in public, but
mhm,
so what I've been mind gaming is how to explain to people that we need it without actually directly arguing for it. And
mhm,
one argument is that if you reform prisons, and that's really on the table now, part of criminal justice, and criminal justice in this country is it's truly criminal.
absolutely.
So if you think of why you put a person in jail, is it to punish them? Well, yeah, the punishment should be just the fact that you're limiting where they can go, when they can go, and who they can see. But to brutalize people is of no point because you're
Right.
going to have them come back into society. Do you want them to be recidivists? Do you want them going back to jail?
Well, they do, it seems like, because
Well,
that's
if you have private
yeah,
prisons, there's
right.
so many things connected. A
Hmm.
private prison is an abomination against the human spirit. It is slavery.
Absolutely. Absolutely corporate slavery. So yeah, one of the arguments for a UBI is definitely that when somebody comes out, you know, of prison, that they would have, you know, a baseline of income coming in so that they could get started. Because the problem is, you know, you get out of prison, the only way you know to make money might be to do the same things that got you into
And
prison, which
you
is
can't
a
get a
problem.
job. Even if you have
Yeah.
job skills, you can't get a job.
Right. But you could become
So
an entrepreneur, and many people do come out of
exactly.
prison and
Yeah.
become an entrepreneur, but you need a little capital. You need something to get started. And often those
Well,
people that do
here's
have
how you
to
get the capital. You and prisoners, besides obviously deserving having the right to vote while they're in prison,
yeah,
because there's no reason to think you're not a citizen while you're in prison.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Besides that, they should have a choice of learning, just like every American should have free pre-K through 12 and public universities and public trade schools. Prisoners should have access to that clearly.
Of
And
course. Yeah.
if they wish to work, their work should be compensated at the minimum wage because you don't want them taking jobs from people who are free people. And if you're paying them 10 cents an hour, Whole
Mm.
Foods and other opportunistic faux green companies we'll pay people 10 cents an hour to do crappy labor and in crappy conditions. We've done something about that here in Gainesville, Florida. The city commission has worked and finally decided not to use prison labor for their various upkeep and infrastructure upkeep projects. So that's a tiny, tiny step. But the federal level, you go to the federal level because you want to change things fast enough to keep the next generation in a habitable planet.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I ran and why a lot of people my age are deciding to run federally, because we just don't have the time. You know, we don't have time to climb the ladder slowly as they would like us to
Well,
do.
you know, I've had a good professional career in technical engineering, but in America, my highest salary was 22 years ago. The domination of corporations of corporate profits by the efforts of the lobbyists have made the lobbyists the profit center, and they neglect engineering. For instance, in Boeing, they had no engineers, they had no checks on the complete overhaul of the powertrain and the fact that the plane would be flying by computer control and overriding the pilot. They didn't test it. They lobbied and got out of any requirement of flight testing. And it should destroy the whole company, but we will bail them out because we like supporting people who are incompetent. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, I do, you know, really like your platform. I was looking and I'm very much aligned with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Only thing that I really thought was that it seems like you should be on board with universal basic income besides.
Well, let me continue that through the prisons, which the point that you made is excellent. I think I expand upon that slightly by saying that when you choose to work in prison, you should have all of that money and not to spend then, because being in prison should completely be paid for by the citizenry who determined that it is a social value to put you there. They won't put you there and then charge you for being there. That's insane.
Right.
So,
or you can't get out because you have to pay bail and you're stuck there because you can't pay your bail. You know?
Oh, but
yeah,
no cash bail, no pre-trial incarceration until. I mean, the very worst, if you really want to try and protect people, then you can put on ankle monitors, and that's a whole lot better than being in jail. For instance, you can wear long bell bottoms and you can keep your job. But the money that you earn should either be put towards starting the small business when you get out, or supporting your fracking family.
Yeah.
And taking the bread owner or either adult out of the family for a few years and expecting the family to exist is insane.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that just continues a cycle of poverty and oppression in that family. And then you see the children end up following in the same suit oftentimes because that's what they know. And that's very upsetting and disturbing. And it really is a bad cycle that we need to find a way to end. And I think supporting people when they get out of prison is a clear sign that we don't want them to go back.
What we decided, quote, we Democrats decided is that Joe Biden is our best candidate. And I think it's fair to talk about your candidate's proud accomplishments. His proud accomplishments include passing the crime bill, the 3 strikes you're out, legalization of private prisons at the federal level. And he destroyed millions of Black families. So that's our values. That's what we're running on. And if you don't want me to say that, don't nominate him. You know?
Yeah, no, it's a travesty. I mean, it just I don't, yeah, people aren't thinking. It's an unfortunate thing. I think that one reason that I did like Andrew Yang was that his slogan was "Make America Think Harder." The math and the math hats were supposed to be making America think harder. So I feel like we haven't been thinking on both sides of the aisle, because we're electing people simply based on name recognition for
Oh,
quite
no,
some
no,
time.
no, no. If your resume, your curriculum vitae, what you have done and that makes you a qualified candidate for something else is not the title that you have held. It is what you did while you held that title. And
Right.
nobody in the Democratic Party in the last 40 years has much to be proud of in that regard, because like the other party, well, I think the analogy that amuses me is that the Republicans are playing like the Harlem Globetrotters and the Democrats are the Washington Generals, the paid opposition. They go to the same pay window at the end of the game, and then they go out and have a beer. And I'm delighted with the having the beer part, but getting paid by the same people does not leave
Yeah.
differentiation between the parties.
No, it's just two corporate parties, and I hope that's becoming more and more clear as we go on. I hope that people will get the wool out of their eyes and realize that we just have two branches of a corporate party,
Well
and they're
said.
basically pitting us against each other. The media is very good at making it seem like they're very divided, that the parties are so far, far left, and all these things
Well,
that they say that are completely misnomers. So,
Trump has a certain genius. It's all about self-preservation and self-enrichment. And he does not have human empathy in any observable degree, or even
no.
humor. But his genius shows up when he's, well, background. I think you're probably aware, very few people seem to be aware, that just a few months ago, Biden said that if Medicare for All passed, he would veto it.
Yeah, that's disturbing.
So
Yeah.
this creates a big window which Trump can jump through, where I've heard, I haven't traced it down, that he is actually supporting a Medicare for All. And people right now understand that and had an incredibly large approval rating, something like 70% in the general population. Now, when you associate with a candidate, the candidate doesn't fare as well when you call it socialized medicine. But when you just say, just like Medicare, you will be able to go to any doctor and you won't have to pay premiums or copays or deductibles. You just get treated. Enough people know, old people, to know that they're better off than anybody with private health insurance. It's pretty simple. And the
Right.
cost is dramatically less. And I've been working with Dr. Gerald Friedman at UMass Amherst for 3 years on messaging. So it's interesting times.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. Well, I wish I had a bit more time to chat, but I do have to go to my day job still shortly.
Job. That's exactly the advantage I have at my age, is a little bit of engineering consulting I do after midnight.
That's okay. You're a night owl?
Well, I don't run out of things I want to do on the political side in the last 48 months. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, that's for sure. So I pretty much work around the clock, despite my wife's sometimes disapproval of, of such. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And basically, I just hope that you would consider adding some form of a universal basic income to your
let me
platform.
conclude. I don't intend to add it to my platform, but I do intend to have it in my issues more clearly. That
Okay.
after you do these good things for prisoners, which are absolutely demanded by any sense of humanity and justice, You have allowed them to keep the money they earned to use after jail. You're providing them 3 meals and a place to live, even though it's not where they want to be. And why should a person who's not in prison not have as good a life? Tell me why we should not have universal basic income. That's the approach I'm taking.
That's great.
And I think that message is better.
Well, that's great, Tom. However you want to message it is totally up to your constituency. And obviously we have totally different constituencies in Florida than Oregon. So I appreciate you messaging it in a way that people can understand more clearly from where you're coming from, which is very important. So I definitely appreciate that. And I appreciate getting to talk to you. We should definitely make more time to chat. Yeah, we should definitely make more time to chat. And I'm going to be watching your primary for sure. And if there's any way I can help you, if you need me to share something on Twitter or support you in some way, let me know.
Well, we have a good team. Gabby has put together an incredibly large team because we take advantage of the pandemic and recognize that we have the ability. It doesn't matter where people live. We have volunteers. Where all do we have volunteers, Gabby? They're all across the nation.
Well, that's good. Well, if you need any help with anything that comes up, Gabby or Tom, you just let me know, and I'll be happy to try to connect you with whoever can help you. Okay, so you just let me know, and I appreciate your time.
Oh, and your time as well. No, my time, every bit I can devote to this, and I'm very fortunate that way. I am an old white guy. My group, my demographic should be profiled. If anybody should be profiled, we have sat by and let the world degrade under the system of corporate peonage, and they finally have reached the French Revolution stage, where that last non-support, give all the money to the people who have more money than they can even count, and let people starve. We are facing food shortages, mile-long food lines of people in cars, but you can't change a car into food. And we're plowing billions of dollars of food into the ground, and somebody was going to eat that food. We'll find out in a few months who. So we may have not only people out on the streets because the banks throw them out of the houses while we bail out the banks.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can bail out the people, Tom, and that's, I think, what we both are fighting for here. So,
well, if we wake up the Congress, they can do that, and if they wake up, they could do everything.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, hopefully we can replace a lot of them in the coming cycles here, and I hope that you're somebody that, you know, does get in there and we can work together.
Well, I think we have to redeem the people that are there, and that's the point. Take the nonviolent resistance, the nonviolent revolution into the House, and talk to the people who are sitting beside you and over there across the aisle, and say, people in your district are starving. You have 200,000 new people on the street who got kicked out of their apartments. They got kicked out of the house in 2008 into apartments, and now they're being kicked out of their apartments.
Yeah, I mean, it's despicable. I hope we can reform from the inside, but I do feel we probably need to replace a good portion of people because they're too entrenched in the system by this point. So some people do need to be replaced.
We give them a pathway to replace themselves. To become what they always wanted to be, I believe, which is publicly elected. You make the public funding generous enough, and you fight off the corporate candidates because you get all the volunteers in the district as well as the money from the vouchers, and you win. And they will know that if they do good things, people will give them their voucher money, and so they do more and more good things, and it will be a rapid escalating revolution. And
Absolutely,
I delight
Tom.
in the thought. It keeps me able to sleep at night.
Good. Well, I'm totally with you, Tom. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for your time, and we'll chat again soon. So I hope you have a really good day.
I look forward to it. I'm taking you into the work. Do you know Susan Smith up in Washington? She ran the 18th cycle.
No, I don't know him.
She came close to beating an entrenched Democrat, but
Okay.
like yourself, she's
Okay.
a working person, and
Yeah.
it's amazing feat. I'm working 12 hours, 14 hours a day, and maybe my brain's getting too old. I don't know.
I don't know. You seem pretty sharp to me, Tom. So,
Well, thank you.
all
Thank
right.
you.
You have a good day, Tom. It's been a
Likewise.
pleasure. You take care. Bye-bye.
Look forward to further interactions. Good
Yes,
night.
of course.
Good
Can't
morning.
wait. Bye.